What's going on, everybody? This is the Wisdom Matrix. This video is going to be called something along the lines of the dangers of anthropomorphizing God. So what does anthropomorphizing mean? Basically, it is the giving of human qualities or characteristics to something that is not human, or that is, separate from us, like the universe, or dogs, or cats, or whatever it might be. So, why is this dangerous to do when it comes to God? Well, there's a bunch of reasons why. One of them has to do with our ideas of our judgments when it comes to ourselves. God, we believe that, not we necessarily, because I don't, but people believe that God judges people because of whatever reason it is, and that is giving God human qualities. Also, another quality that people give God is the quality of anger or rage or wrath or disappointment, or all these different human emotions. And so what this ends up doing is it creates the shadow. It creates a lot of the shadow, because if God was like us, a human, who judges and does all the things that most humans do, where are we to turn for any of this stuff? And so our shadow is going to we're not going to be able to deal with our shadow properly. Because the truth is that God is not these things. God does not have human qualities. God is not what you would call, good or evil necessarily. God is love, but it's not a human, conditional love. It's like infinite love. In fact, all love, in whatever form it takes, even the twisted, corrupted love, has its essential source in God's love. The twisted and corrupt form of love is twisted and corrupted, not because of the love, but because of the ego. And because of the shadow. It's strange, but the things that let me put that in a better way. But the shadow itself, if it weren't actually for the shadow, we would actually be good, because a lot of the shadow is actually what causes a lot of the problems that we have. This goes back to a video I made before called the greatest enemies of mankind are guilt and fear, or something like that, something along those lines. And this is because this creates this partitions us, which basically means it divides us into something that we like and something that we don't like. And what this ends up doing is it actually makes the thing we don't like appear in the world, but we just don't recognize it. Like, say you don't like that somebody is dishonest or whatever it might be. So what's going to happen is when you do these things, you're not going to notice this, because you're not going to want to realize it. And if you do notice it, you're going to beat yourself up over it, which is going to make it worse, and you're going to end up repeating the same problem, because you don't have enough consciousness to see that this activity of wrongdoing that you attribute to this certain thing or whatever isn't, or is actually making the activity stronger in you. Um, so, so what does this have to do with God? Well, a lot of this idea, but the reason why this has to do with God is because people have the idea of right and wrong or all this stuff, and most of it has come from religions. Even people who are atheistic or agnostic have or don't believe in typical religion. Most of them still have this shadow that's caused by a lot of the problems of God, anthropomorphizing God, and so you have this problem. So how do you deal with this problem? Because it sounds it's one thing to talk about it, it's one thing to say something about it, but it's another thing to actually do something about it. So how do you deal with this problem? Well, one way is to try and just become aware of your different shadows. Why are you against this thing? Is there a better are there cases where you've done the opposite? Are there cases when you haven't done the opposite? This whole thing, this whole shadow topic is one I plan to make a video about it in the future, because it is one of the things that most spirituality has tried to create, tried to deal with, but it's got a long, complicated process that you can go through. But just like accepting these things is one way of doing it. And one real way of doing that is to part of this comes from the book Power of Now, where it talks about when it comes to accepting your or not accepting, but when it comes to something like, say, it talks about in the later chapters, when you realize or you know that you have no peace, you don't have any peace, your peace gets transmuted into non-peace. So in this particular case, say you look at this shadow, say you look at whatever you feel guilty over, or angry over yourself for, you realize that you're not accepting of this thing, and that becomes acceptance. You can accept that you're dealing with this problem or whatever it is. And so that acceptance, one of two things might happen. One is that your acceptance of this thing is going to, lead to acceptance of, the actual. So sorry. Let me back up again. Your acceptance of the truth that you're dealing with this problem could lead to acceptance of the problem itself, which creates it into a non-problem. Or you're noticing, your knowing of non-acceptance of this problem leads it to acceptance of this problem. And the reason why this is kind of important is because of why is the knowing of acceptance or non-acceptance or non-peace lead to acceptance or peace? Because awareness, full awareness and knowing, basically leads to the thing that you're seeking, in a way, but not by seeking it, but by just being aware. So you're aware that you're not joyful or whatever it might be. Well, joy is another one. That's another topic, but because it doesn't quite work the same with joy, but say you're aware that you're not non-acceptant of something. That non-acceptance becomes acceptance, because awareness transmutes everything into peace, because of the fact that awareness itself is beyond most of these. It's beyond judgment. and it's total acceptance once you get past these problems, because awareness is total acceptance, but your mind is not accepting. So when you realize that, you become accepting. If you realize that you have non-acceptance, it becomes acceptance. Another way is what's called the letting go technique, which basically just means to let go of this non-acceptance and this idea of a problem. Just let go of it in your mind. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. Just letting it go. Just let go, and whenever you feel yourself going back to that, just let it go again. This brings a peace itself. There's a bunch of different ways. Because inevitably the problem isn't the shadow. The problem isn't to try and deal with the shadow. Or the way to deal with it, sorry, I said it wrong, but the way to deal with the shadow isn't actually to deal with the shadow, is to realize that this thing is not, or not to realize that it's not wrong, but to notice it and accept it, or accept your non-acceptance, which turns into acceptance, which turns into acceptance of the thing itself, or just to let it go, because most of this stuff is being held on to by the mind or by the ego, because that's how it keeps itself together. The shadow is why the ego has a strong hold on you with emotions and all these things. So that's why you have strong emotions when it comes to something. When you get angry or upset, it's because you're basically getting angry because, well, there's a couple of reasons why, but you're getting angry or upset because something is violating your rule book, and this rule book creates a shadow because inevitably you're going to violate this rule book. If it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen in the future at some point. So the goal isn't to, like I said, the goal isn't to remove yourself from this, or to try and deal with this thing by looking at it or whatever. Well, by looking at it, but by looking at it, you can also ask these questions. Like, what's causing this? What is the rule behind this? And accept this rule as it is, and it becomes, it sort of dissipates. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. So back to what I was actually talking about, which is anthropomorphizing God. So all these different qualities that people have when it comes to the idea of God, jealousy, anger, judgment, wrath, or whatever it might be, justice. All these things are human made. They're not actually part of God itself, for the most part. I mean, they're not actually like God qualities. They're part of God, but they're not God. I know that sounds confusing, but it's not actually God that's doing this. We're the ones doing this, and we are a part of God, but we're also we also see ourselves as separate, which creates this ego and this shadow too. Inevitably, though, the shadow is, so what the shadow is trying to lead us closer to God. That's part of what the shadow is supposed to do. And so there's nothing wrong with the shadow. The problem is more along the lines of how you work with the shadow. If you work with it by so basically what this means is that whenever you do something or say something that goes against your rule book, what often happens is that you become guilty or whatever, or you try and which ends up, making you trying to avoid this pain, because, the ego is like the body. Whenever your body feels pain, it tries to avoid putting too much pressure on that area or whatever. And so it creates this pain. But what the shadow is for, what the shadow is really for, is what you can do is to realize that this ideal is, well, actually, I think I'm going to cover that on another video, because I do want to talk about the shadow on another video eventually. But I will finish with this by saying that your shadow is trying to get you closer to the fourth dimension, or the fourth density. And so your ideal self, if you violate that in some way, the response is to realize that the reason why I did this is because of lack of awareness. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's to get me to be more aware. So the right response, the correct response isn't to be guilty for it. Often the guiltiness comes from an idea of, right or wrong. This goes back to all or nothing thinking, like I've talked about before in other videos. But the response is to realize that this was a moment of unawareness. And so you become aware. You ask yourself, well, how could I act differently next time? How could I use what happened to learn from this experience? Do things like that. That's how you can kind of overcome and use the shadow. So all these different parts of the ego, like survival and all these things, are going to have uses. Which I will try to make a video about the survival and how you can use that later on. If you want me to do that video, comment below or whatever. But anyways, I'm gonna end this before it gets too long. This is the Wisdom Matrix. If you like this video, please like it, share it with other people. If you got some kind of benefit from it, so they can get the same kind of benefits as you did. And if you want to see more videos from me in the future, subscribe so you can see more videos in the future. This is the Wisdom Matrix, and I'll see you in the next video. What's going on here? It's not working.